Welcome to another UCL Fantasy video. What I'm going to be doing today is breaking down my team, talking about my captains for each day, as well as also kind of my substitution plans, the clubs I want to target, as well as just the best players you can go for in general. So without further ado, let's head straight into the video. What you see on screen is what my team is looking like at the moment, and just a quick disclaimer that there may be changes before the deadline, and if I do make any, you'll be notified either in a community post on YouTube or in a deadline stream. And if you want to kind of influence the results of when the next deadline stream will be, it will definitely be on the Tuesday. But in terms of the timing, you can go on the community tab on my channel and then vote for your preferred time. Now, I have made several changes to this team, even with the goalkeepers and the team structure. I've invested more money into my attack, and I'll be talking through every single one of these kind of decisions that I've made. And once again, it's not set in stone, but it's what I'm going with at the moment, and I'm pretty happy with it. So in goal, instead of having Edouard Mendy and a 4 million goalkeeper, I've opted to have two 4.5 million options. Now, if you check my previous videos, I talk about some of the essential tips for UCL Fantasy, and one thing I highlight is that in the group stages, it's very important, if possible, to have very good squad depth, even with your goalkeepers, because if one blanks, you can always bring the other one on during the substitution window. So at the moment, what I want to do is have two cheap goalkeepers, and let's say if Musso blanks on the first day, I can bring him off heading into the Wednesday and then bring on the Borussia Dortmund goalkeeper. So at the moment, I've got Juan Musso. He actually made his debut for the Argentinian national team against Bolivia in a 3-0 victory, and of course we have to wait and see if he travels with the squad to Villarreal. If he does, he should be starting because he was the main goalkeeper for Atalanta, and he's actually a pretty decent keeper. He can make a lot of saves. Atalanta aren't the greatest defensively, and that is a worry, but I think that he can rack up some save points. So even if they don't keep a clean sheet, Musso can still get a few extra points in there. So I like him as a pick. I think at 4.5 million, it's a decent price for him. Of course, it's not the greatest defense in the world, but I think Musso could actually be a good pick. And the other goalkeeper I've gone for is Gregor Kobel. Hopefully I've pronounced that right. That is the Borussia Dortmund goalkeeper, and he's been playing every single game at the moment. Of course, if there are any updates, if Berkey's coming back or something else, then I will be changing him. But it's a decent group for Dortmund. I don't trust them defensively either. Even the other day against Bayer Leverkusen in a thrilling 4-3 victory, you just can see that Borussia Dortmund are quite weak defensively. But having two 4.5 million options, playing for two good teams, yeah, the defenses aren't great, but two good teams in decent groups, I'd say for the most part, I think can work pretty well. And what I like about having these two is that pretty much I can bring off Musso. If you look at the date, Musso plays on the 14th of September and Borussia Dortmund and Kobel play on the 15th. So if it doesn't go right on the first day, I can always bring on Kobel. But of course, if any kind of news comes out in terms of Borussia Dortmund goalkeepers coming back, and with Musso, if he's going to be travelling with the squad or not, those things can change my decision making, and I'll just probably end up with Edouard Mendy. But I just like the idea of having two cheap goalkeepers. Obviously, Mendy's always going to be keeping clean sheets, and Chelsea are such a great defence, but I can always go for their defenders instead. But I do like this goalkeeper pairing. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. So looking at the defence, as I alluded to earlier, I've got double Chelsea. I've got Azpilicueta and Rudiger, probably the best you can go for. There is also Reece James, who's got more attacking potential, but remember, ball recoveries is a very important part of UCL Fantasy. For every 3 ball recoveries you make, you earn a point. So these centre-backs, these holding midfielders, and even defensive fullbacks, they are actually more viable options in UCL Fantasy than they would be in FPL and other fantasy formats. So Azpilicueta, he's so nailed, and I think he's a bit of a no-brainer pick, to be honest. 5 million for a defender who's nailed in arguably the best defence in the world. It's just a very easy decision, and only Juventus, you'd say, is tough on paper, and even then, Juventus currently sits 16th in Serie A with no wins in the first 3 games, so things aren't looking too great for them. I'd expect Chelsea to top this group, and I think Azpilicueta at 5 million, no matter what really, unless he gets injured, he's going to be in my team. And then it's a choice of, do I go Rudiger or do I go Reece James? Last season, Rudiger was the highest scoring defender, got so many ball recovery points, a lot of clean sheets, and he is still capable of getting a goal or an assist, so I think Rudiger at 5.5 million, of course he's nowhere near as cheap as he used to be, but still a good price. He's fairly nailed, not as much as Azpilicueta, but I think Rudiger is probably the second or third best Chelsea defender you can go for. And because of the ball recoveries, and because He's just more nailed than Reece James. That's why I'm going for him at the moment, but I may change to Reece James or someone else. But I do like the fact that I have 2 Chelsea defenders. And then we've got Wan-Bissaka. I actually had Varane in a previous draft, and Wan-Bissaka at 5 million. He can get a few ball recovery points. He didn't get too many last season, which was a bit surprising. And he's still got a bit of attacking potential. I just think having a Manchester United player in the defence in a pretty easy group from their perspective, especially if you look at the Matchday 1 fixture, I think is fantastic. So Wan-Bissaka is a decent choice at 5 million. I don't think he's as good on UCL Fantasy as you'd hope as an asset, but it's a good price, and I think he can do well in the group stages at least. So that's why I'm going with him. Also, good ownerships really for all of the players I've selected so far. No one who's been heavily selected. Rudiger, of course, 12%. Then you look at Musa, who's 1%, and then Kobel, only 2%. And then moving on to Diego Carlos, I actually had another defender instead. I think I had Zaidu from Porto, but it looks like he's not going to be starting most games really, and I want someone who's nailed. Diego Carlos can get a lot of ball recovery points. He's even got attacking potential. If you cast your minds back to the Europa League final, he actually scored a very crucial goal in that match. And there is also Marcos Acuna. I'll be talking about these other options you can go for, but because Diego Carlos is nailed, because of ball recovery points, I think I may opt for him instead. And I think this is a very good group for Sevilla, and they can easily top it and progress to the next round. So Diego Carlos at 4.5 million. I think he's a good option. He's only going to increase in terms of his ownership, and with good reason. I think he's a decent option. Of course, Koundé did let me down in years gone by when he was 4 million, but Diego Carlos should do the trick, and hopefully he isn't as bad as Koundé was last season for me. And then the last defender is just bench fodder, but I think he's the most nailed out of those options, and it's Woba. And even then, he's playing in the same group as Diego Carlos. Obviously, you look at Salzburg, they're on the other side of the spectrum. They've got a pretty good attack, but defensively they always concede a lot of goals. But Weber can get some ball recovery points, and just by playing, he's a 4 million option. It's not too much of a big issue. One thing I would probably highlight about this team, which is probably a weakness, if you look at the date in terms of all of my defenders, they all play on the 14th of September, which is not ideal to be honest, and you'd maybe want, if possible, 1 or 2 defenders playing on the second day. And of course, remember, anyone on your bench, and I'll be showing you this right now live, you want to have players who are going to be playing on the second day. So you don't want anyone playing from the first day on your bench, otherwise you can't substitute them on, and then you pretty much kind of go against the manual substitution. So as you can see here, Woba plays on the 14th of September, so you'd probably want him to be in your starting lineup, and I'll just probably replace Gundogan, who plays on the final day anyway. So that's just kind of a live demonstration for you. But yeah, in terms of Woba, I'm not really going to expect much from him. He's a cheap option, he's an enabler, and also allows me to have good squad depth. So I'm pretty happy with him, and that's what we're going with at the moment. In terms of the defence, it's not the greatest. I think I had a much stronger defence in my first draft video, but at the same time, my attack was slightly weaker, and arguably my midfield too. Now, moving on to the midfielders, I've only got 2 on screen here in the lineup. We've got Jorginho. I'm a bit concerned about him because Saul has come in, although he was pretty poor in his debut against Aston Villa. Jorginho might not be as nailed as he once was, especially when Kante comes back, which to be honest, it might not even be a Matchday 1. I still expect Jorginho to start the vast majority of games for Chelsea, including Matchday 1 in Champions League, but it's something to consider going forward that Saul and other midfield options for Chelsea can stand in for him, but he can get a lot of ball recovery points. He's potentially on penalties, although I think maybe Lukaku will displace him potentially. And yeah, I mean, he can get the occasional yellow card, and he's not really a type of player to get too many assists or goals, but it's still possible from time to time. I just think for his price, he's a decent option. Nothing spectacular, but last season was actually one of the best scorers in UCL Fantasy. Looking at the other midfielders, I've got Mohamed Salah in there, despite having a tough group, and I can see why some people would prefer to have Bruno instead, but to be honest, Salah is just fixture proof, and even against Milan and Porto I think he can do extremely well, and against Atletico his ceiling might not be too high. Could be a very tightly contested game between Liverpool and Atletico, but Salah can still do the business, and 20% ownership for Salah is ridiculous, and his price is very good, 10.5 million, and if you look at his points from last season, 63 points, one of the highest scoring players in UCL Fantasy despite Liverpool being knocked out early. So Salah's always a great fantasy option. He's on penalties, he can get assists, he gets so many goals, so there's a lot to like about him. And moving on to the kind of cheaper options, we've got Edson Alvarez in the midfield. He's nailed for Ajax, and he's going to get a bit of ball recovery points. Last season he barely played, so that's why he only got 7 points, but I think he could be kind of the next Wilmar Barrios. He always features, by the way, Barrios in my drafts, but this time Alvarez is even cheaper, and he's got a decent group. I think Ajax could potentially finish second. We'll obviously have to wait and see what happens there. But even if Ajax don't keep clean sheets, even if Alvarez doesn't get attack and returns, he could easily get 4 to 5 points in most match days because of ball recoveries. So I think at 4.5 million, he's a pretty decent option. And as you can see, he's very template. He's 47% owned. And of course, he's a great enabler if you want Salah, Bruno, Ronaldo, Messi, all these sorts of big name players in your team. So Alvarez is in there. And I've got Gundogan, who in FPL anyway, I've talked about him not being as good an option as he was last season, and the same goes for UCL Fantasy. But the reason why I've got him in there is 7 million in a decent group, obviously apart from PSG, for Manchester City, and Gundogan can get ball recovery points, and he still is showing attacking intent. I don't think he's as great an option as he was last season. I'll obviously repeat that, but still, he's a good option, and I think I may be going for him in the end. If not, I might try to find a bit of extra money elsewhere to upgrade him to Ferran Torres, or just make a simple switch from him to Angel Correa at 7 million also. So I have to be honest, Gundogan isn't completely nailed in my team, but I still think he's a good option, especially in UCL Fantasy with ball recovery points, which is something else that he can provide. So yeah, Gundogan is in the team. And then finally, speaking of ball recoveries, we've got Casemiro, the king of them really, 51 points last season. Of course, with Casemiro, he can get yellow cards and red cards, but so good when he's on the pitch. And last season, he was kind of in and out of the team. He was nursing COVID and illnesses and injuries, so he didn't play as much as obviously he normally would, because he's a key component to that Real Madrid side, and he can occasionally even get a goal or an assist. He's definitely capable of that, and even from distance. So Casemiro is a great option at 6.5 million, and he can do the business. So Casemiro is in there. It's a decent group for Real Madrid. It's pretty much the same as last season, but Sheriff are in there instead, and that could be a great fixture for any Real Madrid players like Hazard and Bale as well, for example. So I like Casemiro. He's only 10% owned, which is a bit surprising, and I think in years gone by he's always around 30-40% ownership, but here he is in my team once again, just like last season. And then moving on to the forwards, this is the big part of my team, and one kind of area where UCL Fantasy differs from FPL. Obviously, maybe it's kind of changed this season with Lukaku and Ronaldo going to the Premier League, but normally in UCL Fantasy, you want to invest big on your forwards, and in FPL, it's with the midfielders. But here you go, you've got 3 premium strikers. I've got Erling Haaland. I think he's a no-brainer because of the group. That's what makes him really stand out, and we've seen him over the years. The goal record is insane in the Champions League, and even for Borussia Dortmund, he's got 65 goals in 65 games for Borussia Dortmund. Even for Norway, he's got another ridiculous record, 12 goals in 15 games. So Erling Haaland is just literally on another level in the Champions League recently. Him and Lewandowski, you'd probably say, have been the best goal scorers in recent years. And with that group, they're decent teams, but I think Borussia Dortmund can score a couple of goals plus every single one of them. Haaland's on penalties now outright, and of course with him the main thing is goals. He can still get a few assists here and there, and with the UEFA Man of the Match coming into play now in the group stages in UCL Fantasy, I think Haaland can still be in and amongst the bonus points most weeks really, especially if Dortmund win and he scores a goal. So Erling Haaland for me is a no-brainer, and look at his ownership, 58%. He's template. If you go without him, obviously your rank can be severely affected if he hauls and you don't have him, and your strikers just don't do as well. So I think with Haaland, it's kind of a safe pick, and the group is just too tempting, and that's why I'm not going to be going without him, and it's a bit of a no-brainer. Before the draw was even announced, I was considering going without him, because obviously 11 million is kind of the same as last season, but I just thought that maybe you could find better options elsewhere, like Messi, perhaps, and others. But with the groups how they are, I think Haaland is pretty much untouchable, really. And then Mbappé is an interesting one. Obviously, a lot of people will be going for Messi, maybe even Neymar, or just other options like Lewandowski, Haaland, and also Ronaldo. But with Mbappé, 10.5 million, Man City is a bit of a concern, and last season Mbappé struggled against them, especially obviously in the first leg. He didn't feature in the second one. But I think Mbappé just other than Haaland, I'd say, and Lewandowski, he's been the kind of best goal scorer in recent years in the Champions League. He can also get a few assists, and PSG are looking better than ever with Messi in there now as another outlet for their creativity. I think Mbappé can score even more goals and probably reach double digits in the Champions League this time around. And yeah, I just think PSG, especially against Club Brugge, they could put 3 or 4 past them, and even against Leipzig, they could do the same thing. And of course, they were in each other's group last season. Manchester City will be tough, and that's where you could maybe go off Mbappé and go to another striker. But for game week 1 or match day 1, I think he's a very good option, and only 24% ownership. And of course, last season Mbappé was heavily owned, and he was such a great option. 10.5 million, I think, is a very good price for him. And he's probably going to be PSG's top goal scorer. Unless Messi starts now scoring a lot of goals, I think Mbappé will end up as their top goal scorer by the end of the season. So it's basically between them two. But at the moment, Mbappé is just looking like the main talisman in terms of the goals. And then looking at Cristiano Ronaldo, he scored on his debut twice against Newcastle, and obviously not the greatest goals in the world, but that's Ronaldo. He can score any type of goal, and it doesn't really matter. The ball goes in the back of the net, and that's what you want. And as a fantasy asset, it's just a dream, really. He's on penalties, of course. Obviously, some people will be saying, oh, it might be Bruno, they might share them. That could be an option, but I think he's going to be on penalties. He's going to be playing pretty much every single game. I think he's going to be improving his Champions League record, which I think stagnated a bit in the years gone by. But with that group, I think it's a decent group overall, and it's quite evenly matched between Atalanta and Villarreal. But when you add in United in there, they're by far the favourites, and Ronaldo's at 40% ownership. If he was at Juventus, I probably would have stayed clear from Ronaldo, but because he's at United, a better team, and United's group is much easier, in my opinion, compared to Juventus having Chelsea, I'd probably be going with Ronaldo in match day 1. But of course, if I don't, I'll let you guys know, and I may change things, maybe put Bruno instead of Salah. But Ronaldo is one of the best options you can go for with his move to Manchester United, and I think he can do really well. Of course, the kind of big absentees, especially from my first draft video, include Messi, and he just came back from Argentina, and he didn't even feature in Ligue 1 at the weekend. So of course, I expect him to feature, same with Musso and the other Argentinians and South Americans in the Champions League. But still, let's just keep an eye on that situation, and then we can fully confirm our transfers and see how UCL Fantasy and these lineups are affected. In terms of the captaincy, I think I'm going to keep it very simple. So on the first day, it's a no-brainer. Ronaldo would be my captain if he stays in my team. And then if he blanks, remember, during the substitution window, not only can you make substitutions, but you can also change your captain to someone who hasn't played yet. So that would be to a player on the 15th of September. And I think it would be between Salah, Mbappé and Haaland. But looking at the fixtures, if we look at them quickly, so the ones on the Tuesday, I think Ronaldo would be a no-brainer. I'm not going to overthink that. But looking at the fixtures on the Wednesday, Dortmund face Besiktas. I think Haaland could do really well in that. And even PSG against Club Brugge. Liverpool are at home to Milan. That's what does appeal me about captaining Salah. But I think I'd probably be leaning towards Haaland or Mbappé in this one. And Mbappé has done well in a lot of away games for PSG, especially when they're playing on the counter-attack. So I am intrigued by Mbappé, but then again, if Messi comes into the mix, which he probably will, and then you have Di Maria, Neymar and other attacking players for PSG, you compare that to Dortmund, and Haaland's pretty much the main focal point, especially with Sancho now at Manchester United. So I am maybe tempted to go with Haaland as my second captain if possible. But of course, Mbappé and Salah are also very good options on the second day, and I am spoiled for choice. So as things stand, that's what I probably do. And remember, in terms of my substitution plans, if anyone blanks from the 14th of September, what I'm going to be doing is taking them out and then bringing on all of these players pretty much who play on the 15th, and then that will obviously increase my chances of getting returns. So that's pretty much how you should always play it. Try to have any players playing on the 15th on your bench, and play every single player who's featuring on the 14th. To finish off this video, I'm going to be showing you some different options you can go for. I may not have highlighted them too much because I was talking about my own team, but these are some other ones you can go for. So in goal, I think Bono is actually a good choice. I was talking about Sevilla having a decent group in my opinion, and they probably have the best defence out of those 4 teams. So Bono at 5 million, I think he could be decent, even better than last season. Of course, they had Chelsea last season and they struggled to them, but I think Bono can do really well, and he's a decent goalkeeper option. You can also think of De Gea, but the reason why I'm probably not too keen on him is because he prevents you from getting free outfield Manchester United players, which with the group they have, you might want to be jumping on at some point in the group stages. And then I think Mendy and Ederson are probably two of the standout goalkeeper options. Same with Donnarumma, just playing in three of the best teams pretty much in the competition. But Mendy is my personal favourite. 6 million, yeah, very expensive for a goalkeeper, but you can get a few save points here and there. Probably a lot of clean sheets, even against Juventus. The group is very good for Chelsea, and Mendy's just a fantastic choice in general. He was one of the highest scoring players last season in UCL Fantasy. Actually, no, he was the highest scoring player. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, 66 points for a goalkeeper. You know, it does pay off with 6 million in my opinion. So Mendy is my personal favourite, especially considering that Ederson and Donnarumma face each other and PSG and City can score a couple of goals against anyone on their day. So Mendy is definitely my favourite goalkeeper, but because I'm opting for a different structure and approach, that's why I'm not going with him right now. But definitely probably the best goalkeeper you can go for in the game. And then looking at all of these kind of different options, Joao Cancelo, you can go for him, or Kyle Walker or Diaz. I'd probably just go for Cancelo, so long as you back him to start. And in the Premier League anyway, he's been playing every single minute and he's been getting assists. Obviously a bit of a weird one for Bernardo Silva, but still an assist nonetheless. He can get plenty of ball recovery points, and just in general, I think points per minute, he gets more than Diaz, especially in UCL Fantasy, because he actually tends to get a lot of ball recovery points. PSG is a bit of a kind of tricky fixture, but Cancelo in the other games can easily get double-digit returns. But of course, 6 million, maybe you can invest that better elsewhere, but still, one of these City options in defence is still a really good choice. And then Trent Alexander-Arnold, a pretty tough group, but still, his attacking potential, he gets a lot of ball recovery points too, and Liverpool can still keep some clean sheets. So I like Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he's always a good asset in any fantasy game. There's also Robertson, he's also really good. There's not much to separate them two, especially in Champions League. And Van Dijk, and maybe even Matip or Konate, whoever you think is going to start. There's also Kimmich, remember, and I think Bayern are probably, yeah, I'd say they have a much easier group than Liverpool, despite having Barcelona, and Kimmich is just an absolute monster on UCL Fantasy. Then there's Reece James. I talked about him before. If you don't want to go for Rudiger, Christensen or Azpilicueta, you can always go for Reece James. He's got a bit more attacking potential. Maybe he's a bit less nailed than Rudiger and Azpilicueta, but just a fantastic option all round. Decent ownership, and yeah, he's just a very good player, so he can do the business. And then Akanji from Borussia Dortmund, he's still playing. Hummels hasn't been featuring recently, and Akanji, I just think he gets a lot of ball recovery points. I don't trust Dortmund too much defensively, so I'd always just try to go for one of their cheaper options, whether it's Akanji, Hummels, or their goalkeeper. So Akanji is a good choice. Only 1% ownership, just like last season, and he still can do the business, even without a clean sheet. He can get a lot of points because of ball recovery, so bear that in mind. And then looking at the other defender, Marcos Acuna, I mentioned him earlier. He's a bit more attacking than Diego Carlos. He can even play as a left mid or left winger. But yeah, with Acuna, he does get a lot of yellow cards, even for Argentina. That is one thing to consider. And he's a very aggressive defender. He's not the greatest tackler. He's not really a natural left back. So that's pretty much why he accumulates so many yellow cards. But he can get assists, he can get goals, although not that frequently, and a few ball recovery points here and there. So 4.5 million for potentially a really good differential, I think is a decent choice. I'm going to be going for Diego Carlos at this moment in time, but Acuna is definitely one to look out for. And because Zaidu is probably not going to be playing for Porto, we've pretty much lost the best 4.5 million option from last season. So now we've got Acuna to kind of fill in there. He's potentially a really good choice. And then looking at another Sevilla midfielder or player, we've got Lamela at 6 million. He's actually had a really good start to life at Sevilla. He scored some very important winners for them, and once again the group is pretty decent. Lamela can even get a few ball recovery points here and there. He's a bit of an engine, but yeah, either way I wouldn't expect too much from him. He's 6 million. He could offer very good value. We'll wait and see there. And then looking at Marco Reus, 8 million, very good group for Dortmund. As you can see, I'm showing a lot of love to Dortmund and Sevilla in this video, and Reus is just, the only problem with him is he's injury prone, but fantastic player when he's fit. He can get goals, assists, and very underrated in general. Of course, he's not someone I'd expect to be getting a lot of points, but because the group is very good for Dortmund, I think Reus could be the kind of second or third main man in that side behind Haaland, just plucking the strings and pushing Dortmund to top in the group. So Reus is someone to consider at least. Bruno Fernandes, if you don't want to go for Salah and you have the money, I think Bruno's still a really good choice. You saw his goal against Newcastle, and potentially still on some set pieces and penalties. Obviously that remains to be seen. He's a differential as well, 17%, and he's got young boys in Matchday 1. He could be a fantastic choice. Then we have Marcos Llorente, 6 million, he can get ball recovery points, plays in a lot of positions for Cholo Simeone, and I'd say, yeah, a very tough group, especially with Liverpool, but with Marcos Llorente, it doesn't matter too much. He can still get an attacking return here or there. Actually, in La Liga last season, he got double digits in goals and assists. He didn't really translate that to the Champions League, unfortunately. But with the ball recoveries, I think at 6 million, at least someone to consider. Not someone I'm probably going to be going for myself, but still, Marcos Llorente, a very good player in real life, and I think he can be a good asset this season. And then looking at Ferran Torres, if you don't want to go for Gundogan or even Foden and all these other City players, we've got so many to choose from. Ferran Torres has been really good in the Premier League, of course. All of his goals came against Arsenal, really, but Torres is a good choice. And if he continues to start up front for City, then he's just going to be a kind of game breaker, really, not only in this, but also FPL. So PSG, obviously, once again, a bit of a tough fixture, but Torres can still score against them. PSG aren't the greatest defensively. I think they only just kept the first clean sheet of the season at the weekend, so something to bear in mind. But Torres, not going to get you too many ball recovery points or assists. It's mainly goals. And then looking at attackers, so Lewandowski is just a no-brainer. And of course, there's not even Messi, but I talked about him in my first draft video already. Lewandowski is just a great player and scoring goals for fun. Every single game, pretty much, he seems to score. Barcelona's a really tough game to start, so I can see why you might not want to go for him from the get-go. But honestly speaking, at least from my personal opinion, I think he can score even a hat-trick against Barcelona. They're not the same as they once were. Bayern are a superior team, and if they're in the mood, they can get plenty of goals. And Lewandowski is fixture-proof. That's kind of evident, really, in the Champions League. So Lewandowski, still, you can start with him, and it wouldn't be an issue, to be honest. And of course, last season was a bit underwhelming for him and Bayern Munich, and he got injured quite a lot and wasn't always featuring. But remember the season when they won the Champions League, Lewandowski was absolutely unplayable. One of the best individual Champions League seasons we've seen. And then looking at other options, Correa, I think at 7 million. So not only Angel Correa, but also Joaquin Correa, who recently moved to Inter Milan. I mean, especially in Matchday 3 and 4, for 7 million, I think he can go crazy. So Correa's one to keep an eye on, not only the midfielder from Atletico, but also Joaquin Correa. And I think he could actually be a fantastic option. Even Real Madrid, tough game on paper, but Correa can score against them. And then Diogo Jota at 8 million. If you don't want Salah, you think the group is too tough to spend 10.5 million, you can spend 8 million up front, although I probably wouldn't be too keen on that. Jota still fixture proof. Firmino will be coming back up some point. That's when his appeal will reduce slightly, but Jota's a good pick, and 8% ownership is pretty decent, and I'd say he's also quite fixture proof. Doesn't really matter. The kind of main problem with Jota is his minutes, but at 8 million you can't really complain. And if you're not really too sure about him, you can always get Depay at 8.5 million, and he's going to be nailed. He's probably going to be scoring the majority of Barcelona's goals, and he can also get a few assists. So honestly, I'd probably prefer Depay over Jota, but Jota is still a really good choice if you don't want Mohamed Salah. So those are all of my picks. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. If there's anyone I've missed, and of course you can't cover everyone or mention everyone, so that's why I invite all of you to put your suggestions down in the comment section below. What do you think of my team? What can be improved? And I'll look to work on the team before the deadline. And if you enjoy this video, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here, and tune into the deadline stream. If I am able to, I'll definitely be doing the deadline stream on Tuesday, so let me know what time you lot prefer for that to happen, and there'll be more FPL content coming to the channel as well. So really appreciate all the support. Good luck with UCL Fantasy, enjoy the football, and I'll see you next time.